Meeting for the February 3rd meeting. Thank you. Shelley's getting feedback, so she's going to step right on out. All right, let's begin with introductions. Down to my right, please.
Dave Simpson at large.
Brian Belknap, Ward 4.
Corin McGuigan, Ward 1.
Pam Hart, Ward 2.
Aaron Matthew, Ward 3.
Connie Brown, Superintendent of Schools.
Faith Fontaine at large.
Dan Poisson, Ward 5.
Brian Carrier, Mary's representative.
Will Cassidy, student rep.
Abigail Fauché, Student Representative.
All right, welcome everyone tonight. All right, first item on the agenda is the approval of tonight's agenda, as well as the approval for the minutes of January 20, 2021. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Faith.
Second.
Have a second. Thank you, Brian. Any discussion, conversation? All right, all those in favor? Motion passes. Thank you. All right, next on our agenda, we had two new folks introduce themselves this evening. Those are our soon-to-be student reps. So we are welcoming Will Cassidy tonight, as well as Abigail. Help me with your last name again. Speak.
Fauché.
Can you speak nice and loud right into the microphone?
Fauché.
Fauché. Okay, I want to make sure I said it absolutely right, and I know I asked you before. So in order to become a member of the school committee as a student rep, we have a swearing in that we will do with you. So I think it might be, oh, our circle's kind of closed. Probably easier right here in front of the podium? Or in front of, right up in front here? Okay, all right. So Will, if you don't mind, we'll have you come on up first. Do you have a pen to write with, Will? Okay.
Yeah, how does he get in? You have to jump, Will. We're gonna see your abilities to jump.
Watch, I'm gonna get it the same way, Will. All right, well, so in order to become a student rep, these students did go through a process, and they were elected by their fellow student council, and that's why we have Will and Abigail with us. So they had to apply, and they had to be elected as reps for their class. So, Will, if you would repeat after me, please. I, William Cassidy, do solemnly swear.
I, William Cassidy, do solemnly swear
That I will support the Constitution of the United States.
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
And of this state.
and of this state.
So long as I shall remain a citizen thereof.
Repeat that.
As I will remain.
As I will remain
A citizen thereof.
a citizen thereof,
And that I will faithfully discharge.
and that I will faithfully discharge
To the best of my abilities.
to the best of my abilities
The duties incumbent upon me.
the duties incumbent upon me
As student representative.
as student representative
According to said constitutions.
according to said Constitution
And the laws of this state.
and the laws of the state
And the ordinances of this city.
and the ordinances of this city.
Congratulations. Well, nobody can shake your hand. Sign right here. Better picture, Dr. Brown. Dr. Brown likes to take pictures. There you go. Excellent. Very much. Thank you. There we go.
That's okay.
Yeah, it looks like she has one. That's right.
Your turn. Here we go. I, Abigail Fauché, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and of this state, so long as I shall remain a citizen thereof, and that I will faithfully discharge to the best of my abilities the duties incumbent upon me as student representative according to said constitutions and the laws of this state and the ordinances of this city. There you go.
Smile.
I am going to read, just in alignment with that, I do want to read publicly the letter that Mr. Latouche sent to the superintendent in regards to your nomination for both of you. Dear Dr. Brown, the Edward Little High School student body is pleased to recommend Mr. William Cassidy and Miss Abigail Fauché to serve alongside members of our school committee for the remainder of the 2020-2021 school year. William and Abigail look forward to working collaboratively with members of the school board to ensure that student ideas and opinions are heard. Each of the above nominees have great communication skills and will advocate on behalf of the student body. Should the school board confirm our nomination, they would represent the school body for the remainder of the 2020-2021 school year. Sincerely, Mr. Craig Latouche. Thank you very much. All right, at this time, we are going to move on to public participation. Public participation this evening is open to any item that is not on the agenda at this point. We have two parts. This is open for in-person. I think we just had someone go check if we have in-person. And we have set it up so that, whoops, who that was. I think we are probably over inviting anyone in this side tonight. I know that side can be a little, we do have, I'm not sure how many we're allowed to have in this room at one time or if we're reaching max capacity. Just to invite the people who are in the community room to come and sit here instead. Yeah, I think if everyone else is okay with that, or they can choose to remain in that room if they're more comfortable as well. Hello, welcome.
I apologize for your ears. That was not my intent when I was trying to orient myself in there. Good evening. My name is Laura Garcia. I am from Ward 1. I have two students that are at Edward Little, a junior and a freshman. I live at 20 Skillings Corner Road. I am here tonight basically to address two issues of concern for myself. To start, I'd like to take us back to last March when the decision was made to shut the schools down for 2 weeks to flatten the curve. At that time, this school committee was considering investing a substantial sum of money into diversity, equity, and inclusion. And at that time, I was opposed to it, in part because I believe I met with Assistant Superintendent Michelle McClellan to discuss it. I was opposed because I felt that we already had identified marginalized students within our district, 50% of them, in fact, that came from poverty, trauma, and backgrounds that required them to be supported. It wasn't that I didn't think the discussion around diversity wasn't important. It was more that we already had identified an area of need that was not being addressed. And to not address it when the return would be substantial, when you're talking about 50% of the students, seemed foolish to me. So here we are in a global pandemic. And I am bothered that some of the people who felt so strongly about investing these monies and having these conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion don't seem troubled by the fact that there is a large percentage of Auburn students currently in need, and that we are not addressing that need. It bothers me that that would suggest that equity, diversity, and inclusion only matters during good times, when it can be a soundbite that we wave around and put in a headline and say that we're doing everything we ought to be doing. The reality is that diversity, equity, and inclusion that makes a difference is getting your hands dirty. It is taking risks. It is recognizing a need and being willing to fill that need. It does take a village. It doesn't take a village where we say, well, some, but not others. My kids are fine right now, but I know for a fact there are kids that aren't. And you're going to say, but Laura, we're keeping them safe. We're afraid somebody might die. I was a political science major, and I can still remember when I struggled to understand why in third world countries people were not committed to democratic principles like you vote for something. And I can remember when it was explained to me, Laura, the vote doesn't mean anything to people who can't put food on the table, a roof over their heads, and raise their children. They will sell their vote for those basics. What we're talking about here, guys, is there are kids that are going without, that are suffering trauma and abuse, and we are taking their only source of hope away from them. And it's not about 2 weeks, and it's not about 6 months, and it's not about a year. It's about a lifetime. This was the area in which I practiced law. A child who suffers at the hands of an abusive adult and doesn't have an adult in their life that they can trust or that provides an example as a mentor of hope, their life is not going to be worth anything. So you may save their life, but you are also sentencing them to a life of hardship. You are robbing them of the one thing that provided them with some hope. And before you say, well, if we could do it safely, I want you to go to Walmart. I want you to go to Shaw's. I want you to go to Hannaford's, because I know you all do. There are kids there. And while we're at it, the state seems to think that it's okay for sports to resume, right? 5 days a week, cohorts are mixing. Is it just that we can trust the privileged students who participate in sports to maintain the 6 feet, but we can't trust, or the 3 feet, or to wear masks? Because we'll hear about that too, about how some kids won't do it, and we're really, and have you ever been in a classroom? From what I've heard, the kids, from the teachers I've talked to, the kids have been really good about observing. I want to leave you with a thought. There have been no deaths under 20 years of age in Maine due to COVID. Due to COVID restrictions, there have been. The Brunswick teen who took his life, and there are others that are suffering in silence. And I know them, a couple of them personally. And while I can do stuff as a parent, a coach, you have to be able to see the kids to really make a difference. Karen, I know you're going to call me on the 3 minutes, but there's hardly anybody else in the other room, so give me a little leeway here.
What I'm waiting for is, you said 2 issues, so I've heard 1.
That's it.
Okay.
I'll leave you with that thought. Do with it what you will. The second issue that was in last March was conversations around tech. And at the time, I was prepared to educate some members on the school committee about our iPad initiative and how that came about and what was all the shenanigans behind the scenes after I tracked some money and some players and had a better picture. And I've continued to do that. And then the global pandemic hit. Never let a crisis go to waste. So Along those lines, Superintendent Brown, I have your letter that you send out to staff as a means of keeping in communication with them. And in it, you reference the fact that Michelle had some information, some interesting information that you thought you would pass along. So I guess this is more directed to Michelle. And this was sent to me by a concerned teacher, and there was, interestingly, a couple lines in the information that jumped out at me and also jumped out at this teacher. And that line is, the COVID-19 global pandemic has afforded educators the opportunity to meaningfully reflect on instructional practice, outcomes, and student learning. As educators continue to explore opportunities for authentic learning, we are observing an increase in interdisciplinary integrated instruction and the ability of students to apply their learning in a real-world context. With this in mind, and to ensure we are assessing student learning in a similar and authentic manner, the redesign of state assessment is underway. So I guess I would like to know from the assistant superintendent or the superintendent, how is it that we have observed these educators taking advantage right now to optimize their experience? Are there surveys that have been done? Has the state done surveys? Has the state come in and observed our teachers? Because most of the teachers I see blogging online are talking about the stress, how they can't juggle the remote learning, how they're doing their best. Some are flagging behind because they have students that aren't attending. But this would seem to suggest that things are great, and the state is now looking to do their assessments, which they federally have to, in an interdisciplinary module approach, which ironically, and I hope teachers out there from Auburn are listening, mirrors the Moose platform. The K through 12 platform that the state sought to have put into motion before the pandemic. But the pandemic gave them cover, they proceeded, and they have been currently doing it. Now I'm told by somebody, my source, I've developed a few sources around the state, that says it's not gaining the traction or the popularity that they had hoped for, that some in the Maine Department of Education are banking on. So I'm here to just kind of tell the teachers, I've done the budget here in Auburn, $45 million budget, 41 million or so is usually personnel. And just as a little tidbit on the side, visit the Maine DOE site, and you'll see that they have a little program up north in eastern Maine where they are doing facilitator training. They talk about the sub shortage, but they're offering a 1-year training for people interested in essentially becoming paraprofessionals. Where have we heard the term facilitator before? Mass customized learning, digitalizing education. State's busy working on their K through 12 curriculum. They also bought 450 modules of social and emotional learning online. So when the real crisis hits from the pandemic, meaning budget issues, teachers better be aware that it's going to be their jobs on the line.
I have to cut you off there, Laura. Thank you so much for coming tonight. Is there anyone else who would like to come speak during public participation in person?
I would just add one last comment. We remain a local control state. The Maine DOE wants to change that. It's time for our local school boards to do some pushback and to ask some hard questions and to follow the money and to recognize this is not about Maine students and not about Auburn students.
Thank you, Laura. All right, Nate, can you switch to Zoom participation? Do we have anyone in Zoom? No, I'm getting the thumbs down from Shelley. So at this time, public participation is closed, and we are now moving on to presentation of the re-entry plan.
Great. Good evening. I'd like to just start with reminding you, we've talked about the reentry, Health and Safety Reentry Committee in previous meetings. So as you know, that group has continued to meet throughout the year, and their charge has been to, once the reentry plan initially was developed, is to monitor and to continue to revise as needed that plan. The focus, some of you may remember, has always been and continues to be from the beginning, as it continues to be, to maximize in-person learning and the health and safety of our staff and students. So that has continued to be the guiding framework for the work of that particular committee. That said, that guiding framework also is responsible to the guidelines that have been set forth for us for reentry, and while simultaneously navigating a very different way of doing school, doing life, but doing school. So I just need to take a moment to say our students and our families and our staff have done exceptionally well at this, given that it's new for everyone. And I just need to acknowledge that tonight. So at this time, the steering committee is recommending that Wednesdays move from remote instruction to in-person learning, with cohorts attending on alternating Wednesdays starting on February 24th. So an example would be Cohort A comes in on 1 week, the following week Cohort B comes in, and then that pattern repeats itself from now until the end of the year.
For all grade levels, Michelle?
For all grade level, K through
12?
12.
I didn't put pre-K in there, but
Right.
K-12.
K through 12.
Yep.
The steering committee continues the process. We're continuing the process. We met today, for example, and even though this recommendation was already developed, the work continues. We are in the process of identifying the additional steps to increase in-person learning for more students by identifying and evaluating options that are available, and then reviewing the implications of those options at the different levels in the district and at the different schools. What are the implications to find an option to increase that is going to work and be beneficial? So the steering committee's plan at this point is to bring forward to the school committee the next phase recommendation at the March 17th meeting. So I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Any questions for Michelle? We have a motion coming up on it a little bit later. We can have debate and conversation, but any questions that are lingering in your mind right now? So this would be K-12 alternating coming in. So if I'm cohort A, if it's my week, I'm coming 3 days. B's coming 2 days. The following week, I only go 2 days, but B would go the 3 days.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Seeing no questions for Michelle? All right. Thank you very much, Michelle. All right. Moving on. Superintendent's report.
Thank you very much. I have just a couple of items for you. The first is I want to let you know that the bid opening for the EL High School project has been pushed back a couple of weeks. This is on the advice of the architects, and the new date is the 23rd of February when we will have bids open. We have 4 contractors remaining. We will look to bring a recommendation to the school committee probably March 3rd. Adam, I got to help me with my dates here. The building committee is the 23rd, is that right?
No, because we pushed the bid date back, the building committee will be March 9th. So the school committee recommendation, the goal is for March 17th.
So on March 15th, we are going to the city council with an update on the CIP plan and where we are with the EL building process. And Adam, I'm thinking, and the audit is also on that night. Pursuant to the charter, there's a joint meeting, and that will be also considered by the council March 15, starting, I believe, at 5:30, but I will confirm that with you. And as part of the EL bidding project, the filed sub-bids have also been pushed back to that date. Any questions on that? So my second item is that we received the ED 279 last week. The 279 is the document that the Department of Education sends to school departments to convey what the projected amount of general purpose aid will be. You may recall from the budget workshop in November when Mr. Hansen went through how the 279 works and the various inputs. And so that has been calculated. This is a projected, not enacted. This is the long session for the upcoming legislature, which means that it won't be enacted until June. This is what most school districts use to build their budgets with the understanding that at this time it's an estimate of what they think we will receive. The good news for us was that we did well in special education, and we are up just over $1.1 million in our general purpose aid. If we had not had the special education bump, then we'd be down about $200,000. So we're very grateful. I think Mr. Fairchild's in the audience, so Ryan, thank you for your good work. So we will continue to watch that. The other piece with the 279 is that we will verify the information that's contained in there. Generally, there's a process to go through regarding enrollments and counts, and just to verify that the numbers are correct, we'll make sure that they are. And then the last piece under my report is the Essr Funds, and I don't remember the acronym, Michelle. I'd have to look to you. I never get that right. But essentially, this is the next phase of relief money that has flowed to school departments. We estimate that it will be about $3.2 million at this point. The regulations around these funds are comparable to the CARES Act that was released about March a year ago, and therefore we have a longer time by which we can spend it. The department is strongly emphasizing that the funds are used to the extent possible not to build yourself a cliff. And by that, if any of you were around in 2008, 2009, what happens when you use federal money that goes away to build in things like positions, when it goes away and you want to continue the position, you have a cliff. You essentially need to find another way to fund that, or the position goes away. So to the extent that we can, we've been encouraged to use the money for one-time purchases. It still needs to be tied to COVID in some way. The department is still looking for things that have been affected by COVID, such as daycare. I know that's a very strong concern for members around the horseshoe here, so we'll look to have that funded. The application deadline, Adam, if I recall, has not been set yet.
There is no deadline other than you have to have an approved application before you can start spending the funds. But because the funds can be spent through September of '23, there is no hard deadline. There may be one at some point, but right now there is no deadline to submit.
So that is the update on Essr, and I'd be happy to take any questions at this point. And just go ahead, Mr. Smith.
No, I'll go ahead and finish.
No, this is just one other FYI on budget. Doesn't seem possible, but the 24th of February, we're going to start budget presentations. And so that evening will be a full complement of budget presentations by the administrators. I will have a budget message, Mr. Carrier, in order to give the committee an understanding comparable to what the city has done of what's on the school side. With that, recommendations to you. And then we meet pretty much every Wednesday from that day forward until I think it's mid-April or so. So Mr.
Yeah, thank you. The ESSR funds, I'd love to know what that acronym is. I like CARES. It seemed just made sense. There's an application process to draw down the funds?
Yeah, so once the school department has determined how we'd like to spend the funds, we then submit an application to the DOE with the specifics of that. Right. And then they would either weigh in with questions or changes, or they would approve it.
Is that a consistent process from the CARES Act? And what was the turnaround time when you put in a request to draw down funds?
I want to say it was maybe a couple weeks.
Right.
It was a reasonable turnaround time.
Because my concern, and I think you anticipate this, is the daycare, which actually, in my opinion, and I know it's all anecdotal, put kids in school remotely. That I spoke with Sabrina recently, and the attendance has gone to almost to nil. That families cannot afford this, And I'm just wondering, and I know we can fund it through March 12th currently.
Yes, March 12th.
Does the calendar allow this application process and approval process to come through so that it's not interrupted past March 12th, in your best estimation?
In my best estimation, I think the answer, Dave, is yes.
Okay.
I also think it's almost a certainty that this will be approved.
Right.
So I'm not as concerned that we have the whole thing done and submitted. You know, there's some conversations we can have with DOE around that,
Well,
but
we need to, too. This is just this is something I'm passionate about, that I do believe this is one way. I mean, attendance went from, in the 30s and 40s down to 3. So, thank you, I appreciate it.
And it will, I think it's important for the school committee to understand too, that this funding will follow the same process that we followed with CARES money through the finance committee, what are the needs through the finance committee, will it follow the same process?
Yes, it is. We have put this on the finance agenda for Thursday, and then depending on the outcome of that committee, we'll bring it back to the school committee with those recommendations, probably on the 24th of February.
All right, great. Any other
Miss-
questions for Dr. Brown?
I do have the acronym if you,
yes.
so it's the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Things like that will keep me up at night.
I'm glad you brought up
We don't want that.
position part, because I think I reached out to you as far as increasing the amount of social workers or mental health professionals in school. But as you said, if we do hire those people, then we're going to put ourselves on a cliff and not be able to support them after. So it might be something might consider putting in the budget, especially considering when kids do come back to school.
All right, any other questions for Dr. Brown? Okay, moving on. Nothing under the under the chairperson's report. Mr. Carrier, city council update.
Awaiting the meeting with the school committee. That's basically it. We're minor budget talks and other things in regards to that. A lot of interest about the school plans, but as you guys said tonight, they'll be pushed back. So, waiting.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Carrier. All right, committee reports. Finance committee, I don't believe met. Policy subcommittee, you have the minutes there. Anything to report out on either one of those two that we might have missed? No? All right. In the standing committees, the curriculum committee, Shelley and I met to review policy, to re-review policy IJJ, the selection of educational materials, just to make sure that the wording sounded okay before it's presented to the policy committee. Any other committees? All right, seeing none, moving on.
Sorry, is that on the, I'm sorry, I dropped the agenda. Is it on the agenda to talk about the policy change around the student expectation, graduation expectation?
That will
It
be.
is, okay, yes, thank you.
Yep, it's on it's under new business.
it's under new business.
Yep,
Thank you.
yep, absolutely. All right, moving on from standing committees, old business. Let's move on to some of these policies here. Policy BDEA, the Auburn and Lewiston Educational Cooperation. Can I entertain a motion for a second reading and deletion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Belknap. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. Not sure if there's any public comment on this. Probably seeing none. All right, any conversation? Seeing none, let's take a vote. All those in favor of the deletion of policy BDEA? Motion passes. Thank you. Policy EBCA, Comprehensive Emergency Operation Management Plan. Can I have a motion to approve policy EBCA, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Faith. Can I have a second?
Second.
Sorry, I think I heard Corin over here. Thank you, Corin. Any public comment on that? Seeing none, debate, conversation. All right, let's take a vote. All those in favor? Seeing none opposed, motion passes. All right, the reentry plan. Can I entertain a motion to amend the return to school plan for 2020-2021 to increase student in-person learning by alternating cohorts attending every other Wednesday? No one wants to make I'll make the motion. Anyone want a second?
Second.
Thank you, Corin. All right. Any public comment on this? To the reentry plan? Okay, I think Mr. Neer's gone to take a peek. None, all right, seeing none for public comment, let's open it up. Any questions, comments?
Oh, there's Zoom.
Oh, or Zoom. So Nate, we have someone on Zoom. Public comment on the reentry plan. Get confirmation that he heard you, Shelley. And are they staying on this screen over here? Okay, all right. Hi, welcome. Can you tell us your name and your address, please? Hi, welcome. So you are here, this is public comment on the reentry plan, which is alternating Wednesdays.
Correct. I'm curious as to why pre-K is not involved in the reentry. As it is, I have, just to give a little bit of background, I have a pre-K student who goes Thursdays and Fridays. I also have a second grader who goes Mondays and Tuesdays. As of now, as a regular, if he was, if my pre-K student was a regular student in a regular year, he'd be going 4 days and would get approximately 10 hours a week and would have 40 hours max of, in-teacher student time. With this hybrid plan, it's great that he still gets 2 days with his teacher, but that's only 5 hours a week, because his pre-K only goes from 8:30 to 11 o'clock. He's maxing out at 20 hours a month, okay? That's half the educational time. That's not including any months such as November, Thanksgiving, he missed Thursday, Fridays, with the holidays. That's not to mention December, so now we're down to 15 hours for that month of educational time. On his off days, yes, we do things with him at home, but we're not even permitted to have a school iPad for him, because we were told that pre-K is not required to do remote learning. However, remote pre-K students were given iPads. So my son, when I'm at work, and my other child at school who has a school-issued iPad, my son is at childcare, not able to access the materials that his teacher provides online. Okay? So now I'm willing to do my part as his parent at home after dinner, doing his education, but that's at 6 o'clock at night, 7 o'clock at night. Okay? And I'm wondering why, when the littlest learners are the ones that we know need the most intervention in order to be productive as they reach 3rd, 4th, 5th grade and so on, they're not being involved in this reentry program.
Great question, thank you. All right. Thank you so much for joining us. All right, I guess that's a great question to ask. So Michelle, can I ask that question of you? What is going on with our pre-K kiddos?
Because of pre-K and the way pre-K has been structured this year, that has, and we have less students participating in that program, so that those staff are being used in different ways. So there's just not an availability for that at this point. To offer that, we would love to offer that. That would be wonderful.
Is there a reason why remote pre-K is allowed to have an iPad and the in-person pre-K is not?
Have that written down. I'm going to look into that as well.
Yeah, makes great sense to do that. Okay. Here. Hi. Hi there. You are now in the public participation portion of the school committee meeting. Can you tell us your name and where you live, please? Hello, hello. Oh, I can hear a delay in my voice getting to him. Hi.
Go ahead, Jonathan.
Am I on the screen? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Because I have no feedback from my phone.
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, you're on the screen.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
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 I don't know how many more times you can say yes. Yes, we can
Can you
hear
hear
you.
me? Hi.
Yes, yes, yes.
So 2020.
Abigail, were you going to say something? Yeah, I think Abigail might know.
Her audio was on mute, so
Okay. Hi, welcome. Can you tell us your name and your address, please?
Thank you. My name is Jonathan DeLore. I'm from 178 Main Street, apartment 5.
And you are here to give public comment on the reentry plan, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just wanted to ask if you would be talking to or getting student input before you guys make your decision.
I do not believe they were part of the reentry committee.
Will you be allowing students to share their opinion before you vote on the plan?
Not to my knowledge. We have the vote is tonight.
You can do it right now.
You could do
can
it.
give us your
Yeah, That is
opinion.
your opinion right now.
Your input.
But you have two students there currently that you could ask.
Absolutely.
Okay, and that's why I was just coming in to ask if you were planning on having the two students you conduct tonight, if they could share their opinion, if they wanted to share their opinion.
Yeah,
Sure,
we
great.
were going to have a conversation after the public participation.
Yeah, we have, so the process is the motion, public participation, and then the school committee will get into the discussion, which they are now a part of.
Awesome, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Have a good night. All right, anyone else in Zoom, Shelley?
Our first speaker is still in there, so I'm making an assumption that she'd like to speak again.
Public participation is,
First coming in.
oh, sorry. I thought you meant the first person on Zoom.
I think she's
Okay.
about the iPad.
The human being that's here in person. Okay, gotcha.
Because I don't know what way the conversation is going to go, I would like to just leave a thought with you in light of the recent vote regarding the 4 days a week for students that are failing, and now this proposal. I recently read an article from Washington State on a district which is doing remote learning hubs. And what that basically is on the days that students aren't able to go to school because of the hybrid model, the district has set up a location where students can essentially go, receive support, do their work remotely at that location rather than at their home, have snacks available, have individuals present to assist them and give them much needed help. So that is, again, another possibility that we should be exploring. If we're not able to come to a consensus, we do need to start looking at other alternatives outside of the ones that I've heard presented so far and widen our scope of inquiries in terms of how to service our students.
Thank
Thank
you. Anyone else, Shelley, for in-person or Zoom?
Is it a one-time because the person who spoke first is here in the waiting room?
So public participation is you speak once to that topic, yes. Yep, absolutely. All right, I'm going to bring it back to the school committee at this point. So questions, comments, debates, thoughts? Go ahead, Faith.
So everybody knows how I feel about this, but I know it's not just my personal feeling, but we are absolutely failing our kids. Like Laura said, kids aren't dying from COVID. The majority of the time, correct me if I'm wrong, the reason we're shutting down our schools is because staff are out because they've been exposed, or, it's not, we don't have a high number of children being diagnosed with COVID, and this is the reason our schools are being closed down. And it blows my mind that we're going to use relief funds to pay for daycares when those kids are not sitting 6 feet apart. I don't understand why our kids can go to daycare that we're gonna pay for because they're not in school when those regulations are not being followed. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but is that not extremely obvious that they can all hang out in daycare? My kids are playing sports, tons of kids are doing sports, they're playing in neighborhoods, we're not on lockdown. Why can't our kids be in school?
Thank you, Faith. Will or Abigail, would you like to speak to this? Alternating every other Wednesdays. K-12. Any thoughts? And then this is sort of one of those, if you don't want to comment, you are free to pass.
Would it just be like another school day? Would like it end at the same time, or like how would like the scheduling of it work?
Michelle, I'm going to punt that question to you.
We'd follow the early release schedule from last year.
So it wouldn't be so if, for example, they're both EL students, will they still have 4 classes on Wednesdays, but just shortened?
Mr. Anier says yes.
Okay.
So 12.
Are you saying no?
No.
Taking it as a no.
We went like this.
They'd have 4 classes, and they'd be done at noon, the way they were today, the way they were Monday.
Oh, not shortened.
Oh, no flex period.
Not shortened,
Okay.
yes.
12:05, 11:05, 12:05 is last period, and then dismissal. No flex period. Okay.
It would be an extra day that would look just like the other days.
But they wouldn't stay for flex. They would be dismissed at 12:05. Okay.
Yes.
All right, and I am going to assume that things have been worked out as far as prep times we're still following contractual prep times for teachers, that we have staff to cover, and for adding Wednesdays back in. This is, I crossed our Ts and dotted our Is before you presented the plan to the school committee.
Yes, and honestly, there's still one area that we're working on to make sure that happens, but we feel we can assure that will happen.
Okay, all right. Any other questions or comments, Mr. Simpson?
And I don't say this to be, I completely agree with Faith. I'd much rather not pay for daycare, but for me, it's the kids that plug it in. What is the need? It seems to me, and I'm wrong a lot, but it seems to me every day is an early release. Why would Wednesday need to be an early release day? Like this year's school schedule has been compacted. Every day is shorter than it would be non-COVID, correct? I mean, we can agree on that.
Not in elementary.
Well, certainly at the high school level and middle school, right? So
the
why
high
would we do half days when that's a question. I'm not making a judgment on it.
So from what I understand, Mr. Anier said that it's the same amount of instructional time on Wednesdays for the students. It just doesn't have the flex period on the last period of the day. Is that correct? Did I represent that? Okay.
What does that flex period entail?
So we've used Flex as like the building-wide learning lab. So it gets used for any kind of additional support, any kind of remediation, any kind of, like if I'm a Monday, Tuesday student, before I leave on Tuesday, I have one last opportunity to be able to check in with a teacher before I'm out on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And it's become a very competitive situation for the teachers who are all trying to grab students for that time, and a lot of our upper level teachers are trying to make sure that students have everything they need before they're leaving, for their outside on the other part of their hybrid, and it's very intensive on trying to use it for remediation. Those kids have fallen behind either last spring, 2 years ago, or right here and now, or you still need some help, like you didn't do so hot on your last exam and you want to get some extra support. That's how it gets used. But and for those students who don't have transportation, it becomes their study hall, so they can get a head start on doing their work right then and there without taking it out of the class time.
So so why is it that they cannot have that on Wednesday?
So why they cannot have that on Wednesday? So
Why
we
is
would
there
run
no
our
flex time on Wednesday?
Yeah, we took that out in order to make sure that we still had the time that teachers have been using on Wednesdays to do office hours with remote students, to do office hours with fully remote students, and also to do a lot of their follow-up and prep for instruction.
Any other questions? Brian?
Yeah, I'll be honest, I'm conflicted on this one. I've been preaching for a while that, and I agree with Faith, agree with Dave, kids need to be in school. But I also can see this being mass confusion as well. Kids going, okay, am I going to school on Wednesday? Am I not going to school on Wednesday? Is this my week to go in school? Not to mention, this is going to have a huge impact on the kids that are already remote. Wednesdays are also the days, I know my girls meet with their teachers in the morning on Wednesdays. So how is that going to fit into the schedule if my Cohort A girls are in Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday? What happens to Cohort B when they're remote Wednesday, Thursday, Friday? When are they getting their Zoom time or their meeting? When are they meeting with their teachers on Wednesdays? And I think from a high school perspective, what I'm hearing, it doesn't sound like there's much of an impact per se. I'm more concerned really with the K through 6 kids, because that seems where that's going to be the huge impact, especially, like I said, the Zoom times on Wednesdays and those kids that are already remote.
So just like any other day, we're increasing that instructional time, real instructional time through accessing, whether you're at home or whether you're in person. So that has been increasing at the elementary school as well. The reentry committee did talk about that potential loss and not wanting to have a loss in that instructional time. So that will continue to increase at the elementary level, just as you saw it increase once the middle school and the high school went online with Pro AV. So students would still be required to sign in, have an attendance day. That piece will not be changing. And in terms of the high school, I think when that was first designed, it's the same blocks. What they did was they took the prep periods for the teachers, which were scattered throughout the day, so a student would have a learning lab in the middle of the day. They put that all on the end of the day, so the prep periods could be common, and you could maximize the time of when students were in the building, that they were focused in instruction. So I think that now it's the prep period is at the end of the day. The flex period on that Wednesday is the one period that is reduced. Just one way to look at that.
So I think, Brian, I think I hear you. There will be some confusion at the beginning, sort of like with, possibly with everything that sort of starts. Is this my kid's 3-day week or 2-day week? But I have faith in families that they'll know when their kiddos are supposed to be in school 3 days a week versus a 2-day a week. But I don't want to, and I know there will be some confusion. But I just don't want to stand in the way personally don't want to stand in the way of getting kids face-to-face with their teachers. So if there's any other questions, comments, Mr. Carrier? Yeah.
I actually have two. I'm still interested in knowing what the rate of infection has been student versus staff, and what that has been. If I can't get it here, I'll get it from Matt Fifield. And like everybody else here, I'm disappointed in this plan because I expected more in-person time. An additional 4 hours every 2 weeks is not what I was hoping for. I share Committee Member Fontaine's same issues. These kids are playing sports, and they can play sports together, but they can't go to school. I'm completely baffled by that. I see no common sense at all in that. And I will support this only from the fact that it puts kids in school more, but I wanted it to be a lot more. I expected, at least 4 days a week for these kids. And I don't see any purpose at all for a shortened day. We're already on shortened days. I think we need to get back to worrying about giving our kids the education, basically that's what we're paying for. And I would like to see that in the next plan. I really would.
Abigail, did you want to chime in?
yes, I just want to comment on both sides. I don't know how credible this will be, but I did do a student kind of social media survey for Edward Little kids, and it was an overwhelming amount saying no, that they did not want to go on Wednesdays because they're worried about health concerns, and they're worried. Some have to babysit, some have jobs outside of school, but then addressing the yes, there are younger kids that do go 3 feet apart, and we are mixing cohorts for sports. What Laura Garcia said, that there are kids that are physically, mentally, and emotionally in need, so just throwing that out there.
Sorry, go
Michelle,
ahead.
I have a question on the, no, actually, I just answered it. Go ahead, Brian.
So, like Brian, I'm not going to stand in the way. I think increasing in-person time is what we've been asking for a while. But I would also argue that we're actually decreasing in-person time because we're taking that cohort B that first week has no interaction with their teacher that entire Wednesday because that teacher is now teaching cohort A in person. So we're really decreasing in-person learning per se. They have no contact, so the kids that are able to and can pick up the packets and the information and move right along will be fine. But what about, again, goes back to that 30, 25, 30, 40, whatever that percentage is of these kids that are still in the meets or partially meets. Are they going to be able to pick up on a Wednesday with no interaction with their teacher and be able to move forward on that Wednesday? And I'm not convinced that they're going to be able to. I think they're going to lose a full day. Again, we're back to what Ms. Garcia said. We're going to cover the kids that we can get in school that day, but the kids that don't have that ability, we're not going to be able to get to them, and they're not going to have that Zoom or the 1 or 2 or, I've heard some of these some teachers have 1, 2, 3, 4 Zooms a day. Now they've lost all the interaction on Wednesdays. So we've gotten kids in school, but now we've lost another whole set of kids. So again, like Brian said, I think it's a baby step. I would have, I really would. I do want to see more. I think I've heard other districts are now playing the 4 days as a hybrid model. They're able to do it. Again, I ask the questions, why can't we? I'm coaching at the rec, coaching kids that are at Fairview, crossing cohorts. It's happening. There's AAU basketball. There's my neighbors playing hockey down in New Hampshire. They're all doing it, and they're able to go to school. So again, I think it's a step in the right direction, but I think we need to do more. And I also ask, are we at the point where we're getting too late in the process? We're talking end of February. We're only got a few months left. By the time we take February vacation out and April vacation.
We're about halfway through the school year. We just started the second semester. So
Yeah, but we've also
halfway.
been, and one of the things we've been preaching is consistency. So now, again, this week I'm out, next week I'm in, next week I'm out, next week I'm in. How's that going to play? Again, from a high school perspective, I don't want to speak for these guys, but I think they're going to adjust to it fairly easily. It seems to be static. It's these K through 6 that, again, are going to have the biggest impact.
All right, Brian?
I guess my question would come back to, in all honesty, do we think that we're doing the kids a disservice? I keep thinking, if we gave the kids the test right now that would normally have happened in a regular school year, where would our assessment be? Are we going to be where we should be? Or are we going to be extremely surprised at where we actually are? And I'm concerned about that because I understand we're having a pandemic and I understand that people get sick, but this is time that we may not be able to make up. I just think that we need to really put a lot more thought into it.
So right now, what's on the table is a motion to increase in-person learning by alternating cohorts attending every other Wednesday. So I think we're ready for a vote. So all those in favor for increasing student in-person learning time by alternating cohorts attending every other Wednesday. All those in favor? All right, opposed? All right, motion passes. Hang on. But I think the message from the school committee has been, the conversation I've heard is, what can we do? Are we doing enough? What can we do, and are we doing enough? So it is something that is on in Michelle's note to us, which I'm sorry I don't have right in front of me. Michelle, if you could reiterate, you are coming back before the school committee in March 17th with another proposal for increasing, which is coming from the steering committee back to the school committee for an increase in in-person learning time.
Yes, indeed. And that, just to remind you, the membership of that committee is varied and diverse. It includes teachers, administrators, support staff, including food service and transportation, as well as Karen is on that committee. She gets the notes. We have city staff on that committee. We have healthcare agency providers, a physician, etc. A very diverse committee. So I want you to know that we're taking it very seriously, and we are spending the time working together on this plan. So just, I know it's not, I understand your dissatisfaction that it doesn't go far enough, and I will carry that back to the committee.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just ask Michelle a question? Is there a reason why we picked the 17th? Could we not bring that forward on the 3rd, March 3rd, so we're not I'm not saying you're wasting time. That's not what I'm saying. But what was the reasoning behind picking March 17th?
I think we were looking at where you were at and what you had on your agendas, as well as looking at the options that we have right now. And with a week of vacation between that, just kind of playing that out, we will have had 1 week of the Wednesdays after we get back to school.
For both cohorts.
And then because we're going to need to we're going to have that recommendation ahead of the 17th. We're going to have that played out ahead of the 17th.
Okay, so we'll get it ahead of the 17th.
We will get it in your agenda packet.
Okay, thank you.
Pam has a question also.
Michelle, now, I know with the vaccines rolling out that teachers are in this group of, this next group that's being rolled out. Is there any indication, or do you have any knowledge of when Auburn teachers will be able to get the vaccine? Because I know that is a concern. As Mr. Carrier said, is it the students that are getting it, or is it the teachers? And it seems like either one affects the other. So even if there are teachers that are getting sick, or if there are students getting sick, you can't have one without the other. So,
I don't think we've heard anything.
but yeah, I'm curious as to when I know right now they're doing a lot of 70s and over, but I'm curious as to when teachers, or if you've gotten any contact with any facility that would do teachers.
So that will come through the DOE. We have not had a date released to us at this time, not even something that's hard and fast. The last approximate that I had heard is rather stale now. I haven't heard it mentioned again, but it is, that said, that is who will roll out the vaccination program, is through the DOE. But I have just today had conversation with Ray Lucier, who is working with area providers, about if we should need to move forward on our own, what that partnership might look like, as well as Deputy Chief Fifield. I had that conversation again today with him, and he is advocating on our behalf where he can.
Okay, great, because I definitely think that would be a huge step forward.
We're all anxious for that.
I have a question, Mrs. Simpson.
Just real quick, I want to qualify my opposition to that motion, and it's based on, I don't believe it's going to increase the time as much as we believe it to be, and also I want to validate and honor our student representative who gave us, even though somewhat anecdotal, some data that I don't mind making my decisions based on that. So I just wanted to put it out there because I'm sure that, it's curious because like with what Faith said, I want them in, I really do. I think it can be done safely, and I'd like to do more, but I don't think this is the way to do it right now. Thank you.
All right, absolutely, thank you. All right, moving on to new policy. Can I entertain a motion to approve policy IKFC, graduation requirements, for first reading, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Belknap. Can I have a second? I'll second that one. All right, public comment? Probably none. All right, questions, comments from the school committee? Any changes? Can the policy committee go over the changes that were made towards the requirements or why this was brought up?
What's that now?
I said, can someone from the policy committee let us know why this one is before us tonight?
Just because of the changes, of the pandemic, to, for qualifying the hours, the volunteer hours, and then the.
Right. I think what I'm trying to state publicly, Mr. Poisson, is that the fact that are we changing the amount of required credits for students?
No, we're changing the required hours in the project.
Yeah, hours.
Personal projects for the kids. Normally, those hours are 24 hours in the 4-year time span. But due to the fact of the pandemic, we lowered those for the 2 years so that the kids that cannot obviously get their hours where they normally would have an opportunity to still be able to get the hours to meet some part of this stipulation.
Okay, and that's what I wanted to make sure was stated publicly, that it's not a change in credits, it is a change in how many hours kids need towards their volunteer.
And what is the hours that will be required?
What would have been required is 24.
Right.
Now we're down to 16.
16.
For this year's seniors and next year's seniors, it will be 20.
What did we do last spring for last year's class?
Waived.
We waived the requirement. The other change in that is that we waived the state assessment requirement this year again, because there's no state assessment.
All right, let's take a vote, please. Motion to approve policy IKFC, please.
I'm sorry.
Sure, sorry.
Mr. Anier, one of the questions I have as far as the volunteer hours, we've heard about kids that are failing and kids that are struggling, and one of the issues I've spoken to Superintendent Brown about is tutoring. Is that something that could be looked into as far as students using their volunteer hours for tutors to help with either their freshman colleagues or elementary colleagues? Is that something that has been approached or looked at? Okay, awesome. If you'd like to, it's up to you. Abigail, did you have something else?
Oh, shit. Go ahead, Abigail. You can go first.
Now that the motion was approved for returning to school on Wednesdays, for the Auburn Food Nutrition Program, I know I volunteered there before. Now that we are returning to Wednesdays, I'm not a junior or a senior, so the hours really don't affect me. It's more about the helping. How would students be able to help with that program if they are going to school now on Wednesdays? Because it runs from 12 p.m. to 2 p.m.
Great question. Brian, did you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. Two questions or comments. If we waived it last year, and we're in more of a pandemic this year, why are we not waiving it again? If I'm a student now that has hours left, how can I fulfill them? Is there a way that they can actually still fulfill them and meet the graduation requirements, considering we are still in a pandemic? And again, if we waived them last year, I don't know why we're not making the recommendation just to waive them this year. I could see the 2022 being at 20 hours, assuming that we'll get back to somewhat normal, but it seems like this year we should waive them.
Was last year executive order? Were they waived under executive order last year?
We didn't vote on it.
Mr. Anier, would you come up and speak to that, and I'll look up the last time this was reviewed.
Last year, when we went into the closure and we came back with the graduation requirements, we looked at amending almost all of the requirements through there. And we had no opportunity to be able to understand how we were going to be able to get our heads around that. Our number one focus was to try to get through the required credits for those seniors, which is why we had made those waivers on all the other requirements. when we've tracked everything up to this point, by a wide margin majority, I'm talking like 80% of our kids have about 12 hours, which would be reflective of the community service day that they had done their freshman year and their sophomore year. We took that, we didn't have that opportunity to be able to do that last year. So we tried to hit a balance of where can we be in there in order to be able to, maintain a standard of what they should be accumulating for community service hours. And I think Mr. Carrier I was at 18 and he was at 16, and we went back and forth. I brought it back to my admin group, and that's where we landed at 16, because like I said, the vast majority of them had 12. And we said, what can we still meaningfully do? Because there are fewer opportunities out in the community, and then we had many, many kids and families who were very hesitant to be able to do some of our traditional opportunities for community service out there. So I thought 16 was a nice place to do that. The other thing that we've done from a procedural place at the high school is we've been a lot less stringent on what we would do procedurally for kids that are looking to explore community service. Typically, we say we have some criteria in terms of we wouldn't do it for a family member. We've relaxed that by a lot. So if you're doing childcare, if you're cleaning Grammy's driveway, if you're cleaning your neighbor's driveway because you're really working to keep that bubble down, we're just going to continue to ask that you track that, and we've relaxed that quite a bit in order to be able to bridge that gap to get to that 16 hours. Another thing that we've talked about, because we missed that community service day last year, and that's why we hit the balance of trying to talk about 20. One of the areas that we were looking to do, typically our community service day happens in the spring. We were looking to do one possibly this fall. Twofold: one, to have an opportunity to get some hours, but two, it really, as a building community, is such an uplifting thing and really pulls the school together, and that looked like a good opportunity to be able to do something if all goes right, optimistically, to come next fall. There's no guarantee in that, but if we do, let's plan for that. So we've already started to have those conversations of let's plan a community service day for next fall and then another one in the spring to help those who are currently juniors now have a way to get to that 20 hours. But procedurally from in-house, when we talk about what would we count for community service, we've become a lot more, forgiving, liberal, whatever word you want to do. We're much more open to many of those things because usually we try to push the kids out into the community, but in light of all the circumstances, we understand that and we appreciate that. We want you to be giving in some manner, and whether it be tutoring or shoveling next door or whatever those opportunities that can come for kids. I am very concerned about the many of the students who have participated in the food delivery. If we can get more people involved in that, whether it's the off cohort, we would do that. I know Chris Piercy is very concerned about that because those kids have rocked and been just an important part of that project. So we would absolutely take whatever we can, but we really tried to have some kind of threshold to meet where we could intentionally think of it. Last year, we were treading water as hard as we could in every aspect with those seniors.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, Mr. Carrier?
It made me think, and this is for Scott, and it's something that I saw this morning, and I thought again when Abigail just mentioned it, that she started a web page for assisting the students. And this morning I happened to see a news broadcast about students who are tech savvy, which is just about every one of them are more tech savvy than the older folks sitting at this table.
Hey.
Okay. But they were helping the seniors who are not tech savvy be able to get their appointments, because the largest problem with getting our vaccinations right now is the fact that the seniors cannot navigate the systems. They don't have an understanding of the computers. They don't know what the little thing going around in a circle means. It's just a thought that, you got to put a thing out to the public that's, that we've got some high school students that would be more than happy to help you get it. Looks like a good way to do it.
When we've had community service days, one of the more popular ones is to go to some of our area nursing homes and do a variety of activities. The trick is trying to help them and navigate that in an independent way and kind of set up that framework, but I would absolutely support that. That's a tremendous idea. And I saw the same clip, we have very savvy kids that could get them signed in for their vaccinations lickety-split.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Abigail?
Circling back to the food nutrition program, you brought up the alternating cohort days, so when we aren't in person, we would help volunteer if we were able to. How would that work? I know it's not like it was just brought up, but because we do have remote learning on Thursday, Friday, and there are kids that need those meals, and there's a very huge amount of number of kids that do need those meals. So how would that work?
Yeah. We haven't thought that one all the way out, but in my head, as I was traveling here tonight, because it really is a big deal to me, it may be some more toward adjusting some of that delivery time versus what we were doing now. We may have to adjust by a half hour, 45 minutes, an hour, and I don't know that for a fact because I'm not at the front line of doing when those deliveries take place. But how do we continue to try to do that and support it? It may be an adjustment on the time, and I would have to come back to Mr. Piercy on that.
Yes, so Mr.
Speak to that a little bit too. Chris Piercy, our nutrition director, is doing everything possible to try to keep those deliveries going, even with the Wednesdays going back to in-school. He's working with the principals to see could the school staff distribute meals in the school, which would free up the nutrition staff to continue with the deliveries. So we've all agreed we're going to do everything possibly under the sun to keep the deliveries going. And maybe using that alternating cohort group of students is great. I hadn't even thought about that, but we're going to exhaust every opportunity we have to keep those going. Then if we have to pivot to pick up at some point, we will, but not until we've exhausted everything. And Chris is, and now that this vote has happened, it'll give Chris a little bit more direction so he can ramp that up to the next level. So.
And Mr. Piercy did speak specifically about the student volunteers in our reentry committee meeting today, actually. He wants to keep you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's vote. On the motion to approve policy IKFC graduation requirements for first reading, all those in favor of reducing the volunteer hours? Seeing none opposed, motion passes. All right, next, the subcommittee appointment. Can I entertain a motion to appoint Corin McGuigan to her first formal subcommittee, which is the curriculum subcommittee?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. Thank you, Brian Belknap. Any questions, comments? All right, let's take a vote. All those in favor? Motion passes. All right, upcoming meetings, February 24th, 6 o'clock is a regular meeting. There will be a presentation of the 21-22 Auburn School Department budget. Items for future agenda and requests for information. You know how to get a hold of us. All right, a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Belknap. Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Corin. All those in favor? Motion passes. We are adjourned at 7:26. Thank you, everyone.